Hello and welcome to NADA. I'm Christine Genier. UFO stories are everywhere these days, but it's rare that they're told from an Aboriginal perspective. In December of 1996, approximately 31 people claimed to have witnessed a giant UFO along a 340-kilometer stretch of highway in the Yukon. As we discover, this was no ordinary sighting, and according to legend, this is not the first encounter with UFOs in the Yukon. We hope you enjoy the show.
Until recent times, the histories of Canada's Aboriginal peoples, especially in Yukon, was not recorded in written form. Their stories of creation, how they viewed their world, and major events throughout time have, for the most part, been passed along through the oral storytelling tradition. Some stories told around campfires since time immemorial are of strange entities or spirit beings who interacted with humans. Other stories suggest beings who manifested themselves in various aerial phenomena, such as lights or clouds in the sky, sometimes taking locals to strange and distant worlds. These stories were told and retold long before the Roswell UFO incident of 1947, and while anthropological in nature, the stories foreshadow many of the UFO phenomena observed around the world over the past 6 decades. Now, the Yukon, famous for its wilderness, wildlife, and beauty, and its rich First Nation and Gold Rush history, has entered the vast database of UFO research with a story of its own. It's a unique account not only because of the scale and location of the sightings, but because it appears to put into perspective many of the stories told for hundreds, perhaps thousands of years around crackling fires, of strange beings and lights in the nighttime sky. This story unfolds not around a campfire, but on a lonely stretch of highway. This is the North Klondike Highway. It is a 541-kilometer stretch that begins in Whitehorse, the capital city of the Yukon Territory, and runs through several communities and gas stops before ending in Dawson City, the hub of the Klondike Gold Rush of 1898. At certain times of the year, travel along this highway can be a long, lonely experience, especially at night. On a cold winter evening in 1996, over 30 people witnessed an event that would leave them wondering what they saw and questioning their own reality. Travelers on this highway spot something out over a lake that makes them skid to a stop. Around the same time that evening, in 3 different communities in the region, several people witness an object hovering over their villages, leaving them shaken, and in one case, face down on a bridge, trembling with fear. This strange event was investigated and recorded by Martin Jacek, founding member of the Yukon UFO Research Society.
At Fox Lake, the first sighting was around quarter to 8 in the evening. Then at the main sighting there occurred around 8:30. In Carmax, it was 7 o'clock. Some indications there might have been a 10 o'clock sighting as well. The village of Pelly Crossing, it was 9 o'clock, and in the village of Mayo, it was around 10 o'clock.
For Danny Skookum, the evening starts out like any other. Traveling from Whitehorse to Carmax, he notices that although it's cold outside, it's a clear and cloudless night. At around 8 p.m., he approaches the southern tip of Fox Lake. He sees something out of the corner of his eye. To the northwest of his position is a white light. Not thinking too much about it, he continues on. To him, it looks like a vehicle is shining its headlights on a curve of road. But he knows there's no road. Not out over the lake where he sees the light. Keeping an eye on the light, Danny passes 2 vehicles heading in the opposite direction. The lights from these vehicles interfere with his vision for a moment, but when his eyes adjust, 3 rows of lights slowly disappear behind a hill. To his astonishment, the lights appear to be part of a larger object. He continues on his way, thinking what he'd just witnessed looked like something out of a Star Trek movie. But this is not a movie. This is very real.
We refer to the witnesses to protect their names as Fox 2 or 1 or 3. Fox 2 and Fox 3, they were driving along the lake, and they came down this hill here, and all of a sudden this huge row of lights appears, a UFO actually. They could see the outline of the top and bottom.
And I noticed, as I look across that lake, I noticed there's something huge in the air. I thought that there was no way there's a helicopter out here, especially in winter. Or I don't think a helicopter would be flying late at night. Or I don't think a jet plane would be flying that low or staying one place in the air.
They stop about 500 or 600 meters apart, and the UFO slowly goes over the lake.
But you can see the lake and the mountains roughly, and how huge it was over there. The size of it, I would say, is as big as a football field. And it got even bigger when it got closer.
As the object moved directly over him, the witness, referred to as Fox 2, got out of his truck and stared up into a bright light.
As you see now, when I seen up, it's so bright though, and kind of like a saucer shape, like as it went over. It's bright, it has lights all over underneath, but it had lights on the side too. As you see, you can see clearly see little windows, like almost like on the side. You see under it, kind of like a plate, almost like a long plate or whatever underneath, like when it went over.
The witness tries to use a two-way radio in his truck, but when he turns it on, all he can raise is static.
What is that? I was wondering. I couldn't fit. And the radio went all bzzz, wouldn't work. Couldn't get through on that.
At the same time, his cousin scrambles for a disposable camera. By the time he finds it, the object has disappeared.
I looked at both ways of the road and I noticed there was a lineup of vehicles, people looking. Their eyes just huge. I don't know how long I stayed there. Just stand there in shock, I guess, before I went back and my cousin went and asked, "Are you okay? Are you okay?" And yes, I went back, got back into the truck and started up and kept going.
And at the same time, witnesses Fox 4 and 5, they came around this corner here and they saw this huge row of lights going across the lake out here. And then they recall going past here and seeing Fox 2 and 3. So we know that both sets of witnesses saw the UFO at the same time.
Witnesses Fox 4 and 5 are a couple. They have a baby in the back seat of their car.
At first they thought it was a truck out here, like a semi-trailer truck with all the lights, but there's no road out here. Then they thought it was a jumbo jet crashing. Then no, it wasn't that. Then when they realized it was UFO, they got scared. The wife wanted to go back, stop, you know, and then, but there was a truck ahead of them, so they decided to continue on, and they lost sight of it as they went into the tree area here.
I heard stories a long time ago from other people. They see things following their vehicles. Around Fox Lake area too, I heard before. And not too long ago, even up the Asiac Road. But I don't know what to say, what it was. I don't know if it's human to have that technology for something that huge. Just, I mean, look how much noise a helicopter makes just to get off the ground and to hover. And it makes a lot of noise. This thing is big as a football field and not make a sound, just come over like that.
Close to the same time, a woman referred to as Witness Fox 6 is driving alone along the same stretch when a strange light illuminates her dashboard. She looks up, and to her amazement, a group of multicolored lights are hovering over her vehicle. The lights in her vehicle dim. The music she's listening to garbles. She watches until each of the lights seem to go out. She drives on, confused, not sure what she's just witnessed. In Yukon, the Braeburn Lodge is situated about halfway between Whitehorse and Carmacks. It's a popular stop for travelers between the two centers, a place where tourists and truckers can satisfy an appetite and swap stories with Steve Watson, the owner-operator of the lodge. He's heard a lot of stories during his time there, but on the evening of December 11th, 1996, he heard of an event that seemed so incredible it would leave him scanning the evening skies around his property for months afterwards.
I was sitting at the table. It was getting later at night, and there's usually people coming back from Whitehorse, and this fella came in, Danny Skookum from Carmacks. And Danny's a good friend of mine, and he's quite excited, and he starts telling me about this object he saw at Little Fox Lake, and he's describing it to me in quite a bit of detail.
As I pulled into Braeburn, there was a lot of people there, and everybody was scattered around. They were all excited, and everybody was talking about it.
A little while later, another car come in, and this other fella, he was quite excited too. They were really excited, and they come in. I think he had some people with him, and he sat down. We all started talking about it, and he starts drawing the exact same thing that Danny had just told me. He drew it, and while he was doing this, a bunch of other people came in from Pelly, and they described the same thing that was being drawn. And it was kind of weird, you know, like they were pretty excited about it, because they all realized that they all saw the same thing.
We can calculate the actual size of the UFO. They did say it was huge. So here's Fox 4 and 5's location. You project that angle out to here where Fox 2 and Fox 3 were. Here's a few estimates of the size of the UFO, and based on those drawings, you can see the scale here. It was in the order of 1 or 2 kilometers, maybe just under a kilometer for the smallest estimate here.
Pelly Crossing has a total population of less than 300 people, 80% of whom are First Nation. It's 282 kilometers northwest of Whitehorse on the banks of the Pelly River. Most of the work is in government, providing services such as education and health. The main employer is the Selkirk First Nation. A small part of the economy is hunting, fishing, and trapping, and it was trapping that had Don Trudeau out on the land on December 11th, 1996.
And when I come into that clearing, I noticed out of the corner of my eye a strange light, and I turned and looked at it. It was a green beam, and I thought, oh, a 747 is coming down. And then I looked at it, and it was moving very, very slow. So I turned to get a full view of it, and when I turned, my flashlight beam pointed in that direction, and that thing was 3/4 of a mile to a mile away when I first saw it. And as soon as my flashlight beam turned, that thing went whoosh, and it was about 300 yards away, really, really fast. And when it did that, I covered my light, and then I stood there watching it, and I could no longer look at it without turning and looking at it by turning my head.
Another witness from that community is Jean Van Bibber. Her family has a homestead at Pelly Crossing. She's lived there most of her life.
I was driving back from Whitehorse with my brother, and we were close to Pelly. We were only a few kilometers out of Pelly when he looked over at me and said, "Holy shit, Jean." And he was looking up in the sky, and so I followed his gaze, and I seen sort of a huge clusters of stars all together. And right away I realized that it was a vehicle, and it was traveling at a very slow rate of speed, and I could see it above the hill, and it went just below the Big Dipper in the sky, and it was the same length as the Big Dipper.
Out of the back of it was 2 lights, 2 white beams that were down on a 45-degree angle, and out of the front of it was a green beam, and those beams had to be about 4 feet in diameter, both the one in front and the 2 behind.
You couldn't see the outline of the UFO, but you could see the lights. There was lights on the side of the vehicle going like up and down, and then there was individual lights for several stories.
I couldn't see the shape of the hull. It was dark of the moon. There was no moon. But I could see that a great portion of the sky was blacked out, the stars. I couldn't see the stars. And I watched that for probably 4 to 5 minutes. And very, very slowly it kept going to where it was coming behind me, and it was starting to disappear behind the treetops. So I run across that little clearing, probably about 4 or 5 steps I was across. I turned around and looked, and it was gone.
It looked like something that huge shouldn't be moving in a straight line at that speed. To my mind, everything was kind of, I was really surprised to see it. I was excited, scared, and all these emotions sort of surfaced at the same time.
Well, at the time it was just awe. This thing could move so silently. There was no motor sound. It was just floating. And in how I understand aeronautics, it can't do that. So I was thinking, geez, you know, this is amazing. And then after that it left and was gone, I thought, geez, why did I cover my light? I might have been able to go up there and visit with those, whatever.
We saw it for, I'd say a few minutes anyway. And then the lights on it went blink, blink, blink in different sections of the spaceship, and then it disappeared. You couldn't see it at all, and you couldn't hear anything.
And then after this happened, I got home probably around 10 o'clock, and they were watching a video. And believe it or not, that video was Independence Day. And they were just watching the scene where the alien ship opened up and shot the blast down. And I come in, you know, all excited. You'll never guess what I saw. And so I relayed my story, and then all of them became very, very frightened. In fact, our grandchildren didn't want to go out for a good week. They didn't want to be out at night.
Like it was a complete surprise to both my brother and myself. So I asked him, I said, well, what do you think of it? And he said, maybe it's us in the future coming back to see ourselves. But that would be pretty outrageous.
Yet another witness in Pelly Crossing, a teenage boy, also has a close encounter.
He was crossing the bridge and he saw this row of lights coming. He got so scared he laid down on the bridge, and then he, at one point he looked up and the object was right above him. He came home and he told his grandma about it, and I talked to his grandma, and she said he was really frightened about it. He was, I think, maybe 16 years old or something like that.
Before the object moved out of the skies over Pelly Crossing, it would be seen by at least 4 other people. About a kilometer outside the village of Carmacks, 4 men are out for a drive. They notice a group of lights to the northwest of them. They stop for a better look. While the men stare at the lights, a family of 5 are sitting in their living room in Carmacks watching television, when through a window they notice a row of lights moving in the distance. The father thinks it may be a jumbo jet, but hears no sound. The children think it's Santa Claus. Then the lights go out, one by one. Further north, in Mayo, another 8 people would report seeing strange lights over their village. No one is sure if there was one craft or several.
No, who knows if it's man-made or something from outer space, but they definitely saw what they saw. And this area is known that people see different stuff, though, so that's unexplainable. You know, who knows? Maybe it was a mass hallucination, but I doubt it. And it was definitely a manufactured thing that they saw. Somebody made it, or something made it, or whoever.
They're describing things that are not conventional, that move very quickly and hover and are silent, and there's just no other explanation. And something out of this world.
The term unidentified flying object was coined around 1950. By 1953, it was shortened to UFO. In the years since, the stories concerning UFOs have been rife with speculation. Some witnesses truly believe the objects to be of alien origin, piloted by strange-looking beings. Skeptics believe these objects to be aeronautical technology being tested by governments. Still others believe the objects to be atmospheric test equipment such as weather balloons. UFO investigator Martin Jacek considered several possibilities for the sightings in December of 1996 in Yukon, including blimps.
I tried several explanations. Was there a blimp in the area? And I contacted a blimp company out in Toronto, and they said, no, blimps do not fly in the winter. It's very dangerous because just a bit of a snowfall on the blimp itself can bring it down, so it wasn't a blimp. So what else is that big and flies around?
There are also people who would say the whole thing is a hoax. But for the people in the villages along the North Klondike Highway, and those stopped along Fox Lake on the evening that the giant craft was spotted, this was no hoax.
Keep watching the sky. You may see what I saw. And if you see it, believe it. If you don't see it, don't scoff at those who do. Too many are telling the story for it to be a hoax. Too many have seen. Yeah. They're out there.
I believe there's something out there now that I've seen it myself with my own eyes.
We know something's there somewhere. You know, it's not like we can't deny it because we don't know.
Well, there are unanswered questions. We're taught not to believe in UFOs. We're taught not to believe in all sorts of things. And humans do as they're told.
Despite the unanswered questions and the uncertainty, a large percentage of society believe there is life on other planets. They also believe that there are intergalactic visitors who come to Earth to interact with humans. Michael Bryan is one. He believes in UFOs, and in order to stimulate dialogue about the subject and other tough issues, he writes an article called Beyond the Box. It appears in a local newspaper.
It's common sense to me that we are not alone in this universe, that there are there's life on other planets, in other galaxies, and so forth.
Lorraine Bretlin has written a book, UFO Stories from the Yukon. She runs an ad in the personal section of a local paper that has a telephone number to call if someone wants to report a UFO sighting or other strange phenomena.
Well, in the beginning I had asked for UFO stories, and the first year I wrote, it was 101 stories, and not one of them was the same.
I think at the moment we tend to be looked upon as adolescent children, and that we're being very closely observed by different star people.
We can't say there isn't anybody out there or any other than it would be kind of silly to say that. You know, to tell you the truth, I think we'd be pretty naive.
If I see something on a busy highway like this, and a lot of other people seen it, it's got to be other people seen stuff here in the territory. Not only in the territory, but around the world, perhaps.
Ultimately, there are enough people in Yukon who believe in UFOs that the Yukon UFO Research Society was established in 2001 to investigate and record the local sightings.
I lived in the Yukon for about 8 years, and when I was up there, I investigated UFO sightings, and it was really good. I got to meet a lot of people and really interesting cases. We used to go out in the field and take measurements of where people saw things, and compiled reports and put them on a website and published some of them.
The Research Society has recorded at least 293 sightings going back to the 60s, with at least one sighting from the 30s. Less than half of the sightings were made public by the witnesses. These records indicate that there may also be UFO hotspots in the territory.
Well, I think the one that a lot of people are familiar with is Fox Lake. A high hot spot, from what I understand, is Labarge, Lake Labarge, and also Viceroy, the gold mine on the Dempster Highway.
Elder Irene Adamson is a Southern Shoshone of Tlingit descent. She's lived and hunted in the Fox Lake, Lake Labarge area most of her life. If strange celestial objects were spotted in the area in the past, she would have heard about it. Indeed, the story she recounts here is of a strange event that occurred in that area during the 1800s.
My grandmother, that they stay up right back behind that village, like Labarge, up in that mountain. So they were sitting down by the campfire after they eat, so the moon come up, and it just went up so far. And then here, all of a sudden, it's just like it started drip, just like water. And they see that moon was dripping, and so it went down so far, and it stopped there, and another moon was formed there, another moon. And it happened 3 times.
Despite the uncertainty and skepticism surrounding the UFO phenomenon, sightings on a global scale increased dramatically in the late 40s, leaving some to surmise that they might have something to do with World War II or the development of nuclear technology. But these theories do not explain the sightings in Yukon prior to the 1940s, or for that matter, prior to the aircraft arriving in Canada's north. For Irene Adamson's grandmother, Clonday, seeing the moon split into 3 was enough to have her fearing for her life and the lives of her children.
That time then my grandmother, my great-great-grandmother, she started to cry, and she took out rope. She took up rope and she tied it around her waist, and she tied all her kids to her. She watched Prinny all night, and nothing happened.
In the past 10 years, the 2 major newspapers in the territory have published numerous stories of strange lights in Yukon skies. The sightings have been so frequent that it was decided that it was time to have a conference. So far, there have been 2, both in Whitehorse, one in 2000 and the other in 2002, attended by ufologists such as the well-known Stan Friedman. The giant UFO event of December 11, 1996 was a highlight of the 2000 conference.
And I'm going to share my story with you.
The conferences also addressed some of the major obstacles plaguing the collection of UFO data. Fear of ridicule is one. Witnesses are very reluctant to come forward.
I think the biggest thing would be they're afraid of losing face or looking silly, or people won't believe them. So, you know, we're taught not to believe in things like this, so they follow the code.
A lot of them, their sanity might be questioned. There might be some individuals that are in the reserves that's seen it, and might even get kicked out of the reserves.
There's lots of people who believe simply because they have experiences, but at the same time, Christianity enters into the picture. Most people will not cross that line publicly.
Well, they're afraid of being criticized and thought to be, la-la land, and of course it could affect their position in their job or whatever.
I went to the post office and the next day, and I saw the RCMP there, and I told him, I said, well, I saw that big UFO that flew over last night, and he said, that was no UFO, that was a meteor breaking up. And I said, well, I hope to heck you're right, because if you're not, there was somebody behind the wheel driving it.
The reasons why witnesses and government agencies do not come forward publicly are many. The RCMP, Transport Canada, Yukon municipal and First Nation governments were all invited to the conference in 2000, but for various reasons did not attend. A letter from the Department of National Defence states that they couldn't attend because of scheduling conflicts. Louise Hardy was Yukon's Member of Parliament from 1997 to 2000. She provided some opening remarks at the 2000 UFO conference.
We know that there's a wider world out there, and I see this work as people coming together to investigate and study that wider world. So I hope everybody enjoys the conference, and I hope that you know that you're on the cutting edge here. There's not too many places that have UFO conferences, so congratulations.
Louise Hardy was one government official to whom the 1996 sighting was reported by the Yukon UFO Research Society.
I sent it to just about anybody I could. Louise Hardy, our MP at the time, the RCMP detachment in Whitehorse, DND out of Yellowknife, and a lot of the communities as well. And basically what I asked is for a two-way exchange of information about this case. We did eventually get a response about a year later from the National Defense, and they forwarded the report to a UFO organization in Manitoba, which is kind of like the central collecting point for UFO sightings. But they're just like another organization like us, so it actually the report went full circle, and there was really no official acknowledgement.
This email sent to Martin Jacek from a Canadian Forces Intelligence and Security Officer dated August 8, 2000, states in part, Canada and the USA as NORAD partners back in either the end of the 1970s or the early 1980s determined that the existence of extraterrestrials was unfounded. The email goes on to say, it has been my experience that all sightings that I have reported up the chain of command have proven to be either satellites or high-flying military aircraft. The long-standing theory of a government cover-up is also a concern to witnesses and investigators.
No one talks about it because the governments don't acknowledge the fact that these things exist. There was a news story about this particular UFO on the radio the next morning, but that's all it was. Like people seen this. There's nothing that says whether any airports had it on their radar screen or what it was, or there's no answers. Absolutely no answers.
So the government is kind of like they like to think of themselves as being our parents, assuring us that everything's okay, everything's under control, they have everything under control, and to admit to this would indicate that they don't have everything under control. And then there's the issue of fear that everybody will panic, and there's also things like issue of energy. If this becomes accepted, then what energy are these UFOs using to fly around at such great speeds?
Convincing government agencies and officials, scientists and the general public to take the UFO phenomena seriously and to accept it as a legitimate field of study was a long-term goal of the UFO conference in Whitehorse, Yukon in 2000. A shorter-term goal was to begin establishing an environment of trust, respect and cooperation between witnesses, civilian investigators and government agencies. Martin Jacek, the main investigator of the giant UFO that was witnessed in 1996, would like to see some frank and open discussion take place.
Yeah, my hopes are that we'll be able to get to that stage and talk about it, and then once it's accepted, then you can really put the resources on it to find out what's going on. Like, it's people working out of their homes trying to solve the mysteries and answer these questions. It just can't be done.
But witnesses still want answers. Not just the witnesses that sighted the giant object in 1996, but others in Yukon whose experiences have gone far beyond just a sighting. Colette Opper was a participant at the conference in 2000.
I didn't see any beings. I knew there was beings there. I didn't see what they looked like. It was a very odd feeling, because what I saw in front of me was something that went straight out in front, and I can look up, but that's it. To me it looked metal, but the only thing that didn't make any sense to me, how could that be happening on the side of my head?
I really find that the UFO sightings follow along family lines, and certain people can see them have sightings more often, and I'm not sure what it is. First Nations in particular stand out.
From what I understand, if you have one incident, you have many incidents, and if sometimes that just follows along in your family.
Do certain cultures seem more open to such phenomenon as Martin Jacek and Lorraine Bretland believe? And are Aboriginal people more susceptible to such events? Or could the UFO phenomena already be incorporated into Aboriginal oral histories? Another event that needed to be recorded. One of the oldest stories involving celestial phenomenon can be found in neighboring British Columbia. Elder Chief Kenneth Harris translates in the book Visitors Who Never Left the origins of the people of Damlahamet, a place that existed between the Skeena and Nass rivers in northern BC thousands of years ago. The story tells of a young woman who is taken to a house in the sky by a strange visitor.
This is where the old lady started to shout, looking for a husband for her granddaughter. That's where her name was born, Timmins-Chawa. Suddenly one day, a fog settled in where they were on top of the mountain, and out steps a young man, and the old lady knew that this man was different. He has to be from heaven, you know, an angel. And he only took the girl with him. And it turned out to be that this girl is our first mother in heaven, you see. And the person that came to pick her up was an angel also. And so this is the beginning of our creation in heaven. Tzimlaha.
In heaven, the girl is taken to what is described as a house. In the corner of the house is something that resembles dripping water. A baby placed under the drips could grow into adulthood in an incredibly short period of time.
And had little drips of water from the corner of the house. And what happened, this girl, although they never lived together, and the young man that brought her there had a child. The first child was born. He took the child and brought it to his father, who was sitting in the middle of the house. And what he did, he washed the baby in the little jets that flew from the corner of his house, and all of a sudden the little baby grew to be a man. And that was the beginning. This became the firstborn son of Kiom, we call him, Kiom. The next child was a boy, and he became a man. And now the third one was a little girl. And so that the three children are growing up. They didn't grow up, he stretched them into adulthood. And he put them in a canoe and put them on Earth. And the canoe landed at a place that we call Damlahamet. That's how Damlahamet began, because of these three children that came from Kilowley.
The story this respected elder tells records the history and lineage of the First Nations people from that area. It is a living record of immaculate interaction between humans and supernatural or otherworldly beings. Do you believe that maybe the people in Klukwan, Alaska might also be related to those people?
Yes, they are.
But they brought with them also the first totem pole, remember?
Yeah, they did bring the first totem pole with the glass.
According to Aboriginal oral history, the children who brought the first totem pole to Earth were created in a room in the sky thousands of years ago. This is not surprising, considering strange objects, lights, and beings that come down from the heavens have been recorded before written history in most places in the world. But however humankind, in all its multicultural diversity, has recorded these unexplained celestial events, whether in written, oral, or pictorial form, these records leave more questions than answers. Could the cloud, the angel in the canoe in Chief Harris's story, be the same clouds, angels, and chariots that are referred to in the Bible and other ancient histories? Is it possible that the vessels that these angels traveled in are the UFOs that are talked about today? And could these angels be the same beings that have been spoken of for thousands of years around the campfires of Aboriginal people around the world?
Well, there's certainly UFOs in the Bible. All through the Bible, there's a whole bunch of passages. In fact, when Moses went up to the mountain to visit with God, here came God flying towards him on a cloud. So God's cloud came and landed, and he got out of the cloud and talked to Moses and supposedly gave him the 10 Commandments. So there's several different places in the Bible where they mention spacecraft, and all of the mythology have little people and big people and all different sort of beings that are not human. All the mythology from around the world.
If you go back to the Egyptian temples in the earlier times, 3,000 or 4,000 years ago, I've always felt that the gods that are put on these drawings, that are in these drawings, there's some with a long snout, that these were the original star people that came to Earth, and that's what they saw. And they called them gods, of course, because they came in these incredible ships we call UFOs.
Supposedly Crow made the world, so maybe he was the god Ra from the Egyptian text, this crow-looking creature. And the people back then didn't have a name for him or anything, and the being must have had a beak or looked crow-like, so they called him a crow.
All these things coming here aren't new. How far they go back, I don't know. And how they are wherever recorded, I don't know. But certainly that type of phrasing and wording, absolutely it fits in with what's happening today, although we're using modern words. It has the ring of all the same sort of subject matter.
I think they've been around for a while. It's got to be with a technology like that, they're light years ahead.
They have been here for a long, long time. Even I wonder if we are an experiment, whether they placed us here and then just come and check on us every once in a while. We're far too smart to be an animal. Far too smart. And we evolve very fastly. We come out, look at the last 100 years, from the crank telephone to internet in 100 years. I think we're very intelligent beings. I think we're part of them out there. And I think one day we will remember that.
And I don't know what their agenda is or where they're from, whether they're from Earth, whether they're from outer space. So it's hard to say what it was, or I have no idea who was driving the thing.
I think that these are manifestations of beings who come from other dimensions or from other star systems.
If they have the technology to float a ship that slowly, they have a technology to poof and we're history. So I think there are people or beings that want to meet with us and are waiting their opportunity. Yeah.
I probably won't see it again in my lifetime, but if I do, I might wave this time.
One day I'll meet them, I'll shake their hand. Yeah. And I think that'll be soon. Real soon. Maybe this year, maybe next. Yeah, I look forward to it anyway, without fear.
Will society ever discuss openly these strange celestial events without fear? Without fear of ridicule or fear of reproach? Perhaps reconciling the stories of our ancestors and our elders with present-day experiences. Only time will tell. As for the giant craft that so many people witnessed on December 11th, 1996, will we ever know for sure what it was or who is flying it? Probably not. But one thing is for sure. If you find yourself on a lonely stretch of road on the North Klondike Highway, especially late at night, make sure you look at the sky. Look into the heavens. Someone could be watching you.